Our politically incorrect segment tonight, most people would agree that Washington is broken, I think, that nothing gets done and politicians aren't accountable to you, the voter. However, it's tough to put your finger on just why this is the case. According to our next guest, the root cause is a system enacted a half-century ago where elected officials can take credit for promising good news while avoiding blame for government producing bad results. Let's talk to him. With me now, author of DC Confidential, Inside the 5 Tricks of Washington, David Schoenbrod. David, thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here, Liz. Thank you.
Congratulations on your book. It seems to be quite successful. I'm looking forward to reading it myself. Tell me about it.
Well, about a half century ago, in the late 1960s, members of Congress and presidents of both parties began to legislate in a new way. And the new way involves 5 tricks that let them avoid personal responsibility for bad consequences. And what the book shows is how we could stop them, how we can make them accountable for us and get the kind of government we deserve.
Right, this sounds like the silver bullet book that everybody needs to read. What are these 5 tricks? What do politicians do?
Well, take one of the 5 tricks, the money trick. Okay, they love to promise us things we want, you know, infrastructure repair, more health care, tax cuts, you name it. They're telling you could have it. Now, the way they get away with this is they use budget gimmicks that take the costs, most of the costs, out of the current budget, out of the current deficit, even out of the current decade, and project them decades into the future. So the problem isn't really the debt we already have or the deficits we now have. It's that the deficit and the debts that's coming a couple of decades down the road is huge. And the result is going to be, unless we stop this money trick, draconian increases in taxes, cuts in Medicare and Social Security. It'll be terrible. We got to stop them. And I have the way to stop them. That'll do the same thing that we require lenders to do for borrowers, which is to tell us up front what it's going to cost us. So my proposal, and it's in something called the Honest Deal Act, which my book proposes, is that every year they give every voter a written statement saying, how much is it going to cost us at the rate we're going under current policies? Then they'll have to take blame for the bad news as well as the good and be more sensible.
Right, that is so sneaky, though. I mean, it's the ultimate kicking the can down the road, or the ultimate heaping the debt on the shoulders of your children and grandchildren on future generations. That is a sneaky trick. That's crazy. Okay, tell me about the next one. It's the debt guarantee trick. What's that?
Okay, you remember everybody remembers the fiscal crisis
Sure.
began in 2007. That resulted in the Big Depression. Millions of people lost their homes, their jobs, their retirement savings. It was terrible. It couldn't have happened without the government guaranteeing all of the debts, not just the little debts, but all of the debts of the big banks. And what that led to was much higher profits for the banks, because if they have the guarantee of the government, they could borrow at a cheaper rate. It was welfare for Wall Street, okay? But the thing is, because they had the debt guarantee, they weren't subject to the discipline that comes from going to private borrowers and saying, well, I want to borrow your money, and they look at you and say, are you good for it? So, and any private guarantor of a debt, I mean, if these banks went to a private company and said, guarantee my debts, that had to pay through the nose for it because they were so risky. Government said you can have it for free. And that eventually led to the speculation that led to the fiscal crisis.
Right,
and we could fix that one too.
Right, it's absolutely insane. What's your proposal to fix this one?
Well, we should make them pay, every bank should pay a market-based fee to get the government guarantee. That means that that's going to end the welfare for Wall Street, and because the fee will be higher, the riskier the bank is, it's going to temper their enthusiasm for running ridiculous risks, which is going to save us from another fiscal crisis.
Right, it's just elementary.
Republicans.
Right, it's elementary, holding them accountable to their actions, which is something I don't think they've had to experience in the last few years. David, what's the war trick? That one's got the most interesting name.
Okay, well, to understand the war trick, you've got to understand the War Powers Act. It was enacted in 1973 because so many people were upset about the Vietnam War. And what it said basically is before getting into a new war, the president has to submit a report to Congress, which triggers a vote in Congress, and if the war is not approved, it has to end. That means we don't get into wars without a real discussion in Washington and without both the president and Congress saying, let's be in the war. Okay? Now contrast what the War Power Act says and what really happens, because there's a loophole in it. And take what happened in Libya. Okay? Lots of members of Congress went to President Obama and said, go into Libya and get rid of that SOB Gaddafi. Okay? But don't submit a report. We don't want to have to vote on the thing. We don't want to be responsible. So he goes in, and then some of these same members of Congress have the gall to criticize Obama for going into the war when they told him to go in, but said, don't make us vote on it.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
Right, it is.
So, I mean, there's a...
Right, and what's your solution to this one? We're running out of time, but I got to hear how to fix that one.
Well, there's a very simple way to fix the loophole in the War Powers Act, and Joe Biden, when he was a senator, said, the Congress won't do it because I don't have the nerve to be responsible.
Right.
But anyway, what we got to do to fix this thing is the reason these politicians are not necessarily bad people, they just want our vote. And they think what we want is something for nothing. We got to tell them we want honesty, not something for nothing. And the way to do it is I got a website, www.dc-confidential.org. Go there. There's all the tools you need to tell your members of Congress that you want honesty and to tell your friends that you want honesty.
Right. This is fascinating, David. This is absolutely fascinating. I mean, I recommend that everyone read your book. You're actually not just a critic of the government, a critic of the Republican Party, the Democratic Party. You're bringing solutions to the table. We need more of that. DC Confidential, ladies and gentlemen, inside the 5 tricks of Washington. David, thanks for being here today.